Okay, well, we're just one past the top of the hour, but I figure people will continue to log in as we get started. We're also live streaming this across a couple different platforms today, which is really exciting. And I do want to welcome you all to our MachineMetrics State of the Industry, a manufacturing renaissance in the post-pandemic world. This webinar is one in many of a series that we started early in the onset of the pandemic, where we started leveraging real-time data to help manufacturers and those across the industry make informed decisions based on real-time data. And it's really just taken off. In April 2020, right at the onset of the pandemic, we brought together industry leaders from the World Economic Forum, Boston Consulting Group for a panel to share some of the early trends on the impact of COVID within the global manufacturing industry, as well as just to discuss some of the potential short and long-term impact for how the industry would be reshaped into the future. And here we are 1 year later, and we're seeing a remarkable resurgence in global manufacturing. So, the question is, what does the data tell us? What are the contributing factors to this newfound resilience and sustainability? And are we finally seeing manufacturing embrace Industry 4.0? What does that mean for the future of the industry? So we're really grateful to have you all here. For those of you who have not joined us before, my name is Graham Immerman. I'm the VP of Marketing at MachineMetrics, and I'll be your host and moderator for today's panel. We are also extremely fortunate to have a rock star cast of panelists today, and I am grateful for all of their participation, some familiar faces and some new faces. We have Memia Fendry, who's a project specialist for advanced manufacturing at the World Economic Forum. Please give everybody a wave, Memia.
Hi, everyone.
Great to have you here. Thankful to be working together again. We also have Stefan Blompot, who's a project leader at the Boston Consulting Group. Stefan, thanks for joining us. We also have Bill Byther, who's our CEO and co-founder here at MachineMetrics. And a familiar face, Jerry Foster, CTO of Plex. Welcome back. So, agenda, pretty straightforward, pretty short. We have 3 parts of today's panel. We have these presentations where each of our panelists are going to walk us through some of the data that they have and provide some of their insights on top of that data. We'll then follow that with a group discussion. And then lastly, we'll be taking Q&A from the audience. But before we get started, just some brief housekeeping items here. Fear not, this webinar is being recorded. So we will send out a link to the webinar at the end in the devastating event that you cannot make it all the way through. Now, also, questions are indeed welcome throughout the entire time. So there's 2 ways to ask questions, but the first way, which is most ideal, is to use the Q&A within the Zoom navigation to ask a question at any time. We may be able to take those in real time. We may have to wait until the Q&A section at the end, but please feel free to ask them there. We also highly welcome conversation and our questions within the chat. We have people here joining us from all over the world, so it's really exciting to have you all here and interacting. So don't hesitate to do so as we go. The last quick note here is for those of you interested in continuing along our webinar journey. This is I believe our 7th in 7 weeks here. We have a webinar coming up next week with Modern Machine Shop featuring our customer Mayville Engineering called Machine Monitoring, Driving a Bottom Line Impact with Real-Time Visibility and Automation. You can register for that through the MachineMetrics website or modernmachineshop.com. That's going to be Wednesday, maybe, May 19th, 2021, between 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't hesitate to reach out around that one if you have any questions. It's going to be a really amazing story about how this customer was able to drive remarkable bottom line impact leveraging our platform. But that's enough from me. I want to pause my screen share now and introduce our first speaker, Memia. Care to take the microphone and start from here?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Graham. Hi, everyone. My name is Mamea Fendry. I'm part of the Advanced Manufacturing and Production platform of the World Economic Forum, working on topics such as navigating global value chain disruption or how to unlock the value from data sharing in manufacturing. And I have a background myself in engineering in the pharma industry. And let me share my screen today with you. So I would say that this past year, with all the disruptions that we've seen in supply chains, the shortages of essential medical goods or essential supply, COVID-19 has really given the world a sharp reminder that the manufacturing sector and all its enabling supply networks remain the most significant force in our global economies. And today we really have an opportunity by helping manufacturers and all the supply chain actors become more resilient, become more inclusive and sustainable, to enable the manufacturing sector to become this engine, this driver for both growth, for both recovery, and growth and economic prosperity. And for that, the advanced manufacturing and production community of the World Economic Forum has identified a set of priorities that we're working on to make these transformations successful. So from shared value creation, resilient value chains, technology, workforce, sustainability, and data. And today, I'd like to deep dive into the resilient value chain topic and share with you some of the insights that we've learned from consultations we've run with over 400 senior executives in manufacturing operations and supply chain. So when asking about how significantly COVID-19 has disrupted their operations, over 80% of respondents have indicated the disruptions to be significantly high, both on the demand and on the supply chain, the supply side. So with an average of 7 out of 10 on demand disruption and 6.6 out of 10 from the supply side. And a key observations related to that from these leaders is that the supply chain network design was perceived as the top root cause for non-effective and fragile supply chains. The second aspect is that leveraging advanced technology was very much positively correlated to the supply chain's ability to adapt to these disruptions. We've seen that those who had adapted them were actually better equipped to mitigate the impacts of the challenges that we've seen. And then finally, collaborations either across industries or between the private and public sector were crucial to navigate and recover, and also very much gain importance. We've seen support between suppliers and customers. We've also seen manufacturers supplying national efforts mitigate the impact of COVID on societies. And now as we look into the future, COVID-19 has only been a stress test. And the main priority for manufacturers is really to increase the resilience and the agility of value chains to future-proof them towards any disruptions that might come up in the future. So from the consultations we've run, we've identified a set of capabilities that are needed to shape a recovery and growth path. The first aspect would be reconfiguring supply chain. It's not about localization, it's not about relocalization, it's about having a global network of localized supply chain that reduce geographic dependencies and gives more power to the regional capabilities that are closer to the customer. The second aspect would be visibility. End-to-end visibility in the supply chain beyond tier 1 was really critical to counteract these critical events and develop more proactive approaches to handling them. Reimagining supplier relationship, I think the pandemic has very much surfaced insufficient supplier arrangement and risk mitigation plans. And now we see more and more companies reimagining their relationship with their suppliers and going more from a cost competitiveness strategy to a risk mitigation and competitiveness strategy. Remote working, it has been a reality for all of us, and it will play an essential role in the future of operations, also enabling new or giving importance to some operating models such as remote infrastructure management. Adapting to new demand patterns, I think they're changing rapidly, and the quick detection of these changes and the flexibility to adapt is going to be key to more resilience. And finally, embracing true collaboration. again, either across industries or between the private and the public sector, is really a key source to expand on one's expertise in leveraging these technologies, best practices navigating crisis, but also can help get additional resources and expands the network. So these were really the set of capabilities that were identified by our community as the top ones to increase the resilience of manufacturing and hopefully help it become this kind of driver of engine, a driver of growth. Thank you, Graham.
I mean, that was fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that information. The World Economic Forum has been such an incredible leader in their ability to share such interesting data and throughout this pandemic. So we greatly appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Thank you.
Stefan, why don't you take the mic from here?
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Thanks for having me. Really happy to speak to you today. Working very closely with Mamea as well at the World Economic Forum, and in the rest of my time, I'm a project leader at BCG, focusing on our work in manufacturing and supply chains. And I personally have a background in aerospace manufacturing before coming to BCG. And today I would like to share the findings from our latest survey on the state of Industry 4.0. And this is a survey that we actually conduct almost every year. And many of you probably know that April 2021 marked the 10-year anniversary of Industry 4.0, which is why we were particularly interested to see where the industry stands today. And what we found was, quite unsurprisingly, 84% of companies have had some sort of experience with Industry 4.0 technology. And back in 2016, this was only 17%. There has been quite an interesting dynamic in who's leading in the adoption of Industry 4.0, and especially China has become very interesting. Germany, as one of the pioneers of Industry 4.0, still ranking high, but we found really interesting that China overtook Germany, France, and the US since 2016. And also in the technology sectors, in the industries, the technology sector and electronic sector have massively overtaken other industries as well, with automotive and engineered products still ranking pretty high. Then we looked at why are companies exploring Industry 4.0, and we found more than half are looking at pure productivity. But also, and this is maybe something that is new, or this is definitely something new that we see in our survey, they also look at other means of competitiveness. They look at resilient flexibility, so very closely connected to the points that Mamea has laid out. But they're also looking to produce more sustainably and leverage technology to achieve those goals. But in general, we see that they're actively employing this technology to pursue goals, and they're beyond exploring the technology and implementing single use cases and pilot cases. When we look at a bit about the most common themes, 85% of companies have been looking at big data analytics. Also, many have looked at digital twins and simulation, additive manufacturing, advanced robots, and augmented reality. There's a little trend that the applications that are a bit more software driven, such as big data analytics and simulation, are slightly more advanced than the ones that require hardware investment. But in general, across themes, most themes have been tested out by most companies. Now, I said, they are looking at real value. Do they capture the value today? And the answer that we found is, unfortunately, a clear no. When we asked who has actually captured tangible, real value from Industry 4.0 applications so far, and also an extent that they would do it again right now, we found that only 16% indicated that they captured real value. And in those, there's again this industry split. Technology and electronics is still very advanced. Engineered products second, but only at 17%. And when we looked a bit further at why that is the case, I had mentioned the technology exploration phase and companies implementing pilot areas. And when we asked companies how far they had scaled their applications, 37% indicated that they successfully scaled use cases beyond their initial pilot areas. And that pretty much explains why there hasn't been, if you don't scale the use case, then it's very tough to get any tangible value and a tangible return on your investment. Now, why is that? And what can be done about it? In general, we find as always, it's a combination of different topics. For many companies, they still have to make the leap from this. They have goals, but they still need to devise their clear target picture about which applications are driving the value and what actually makes up the target picture, to have this clear value focus really in the selection of the applications. But then there is also foundations, and foundations are technological foundations. Many companies indicate there's a lack of standards off-the-shelf solutions that they can just plug and play into their existing infrastructure. Also, many executives raise data security concerns, especially when it comes to exchanging data with third-party technology providers or even their customers or suppliers. And for many applications, and this is especially true for discrete manufacturing, people simply indicated there's a lack of sufficient data. And that could be because they don't exchange data with their partners and suppliers. On the organizational side, companies have told us that they are facing often very complex internal governance and processes, a regulatory uncertainty as to data protection laws, antitrust laws, or how IP is protected in different jurisdictions. And one of the most quoted reasons was a lack of skills and capabilities. And when we asked them what kind of skills they were lacking and that they found most important, is specific knowledge on automation, specific knowledge on project management and strategic knowledge. So knowledge actually that isn't too related to Industry 4.0, that is also lacking for other applications. And then thirdly, we find analytics experience as a skill that companies are lacking. Now, that leads me to say, I don't want to paint a dull picture here. And we do see great companies who have overcome these challenges. And the companies who have overcome these challenges and have built successful factories of the future, they have done that in what we would call a bionic way, because they have combined the technological foundations and the organizational foundations towards a clear value-focused target picture. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel today, where we will also hear about some of those successful examples.
Fascinating, amazing data. Thank you for sharing that, Stefan. I was very excited to have your team join us, because while I'm perusing LinkedIn, I couldn't help but see some of this data on there, and reaching out and you providing that additional context. I thought was fascinating, and I also appreciate your word of warning, which is that it's not something we should be fearful of. It's actually, in many ways, perhaps the fear is what has led to some of these numbers, right? And if anything, it may in fact be the inverse that can allow us to overcome some of these issues and move into the future. Perfect segue into, as you said, into some of the people that have been able to drive some success and what we're seeing with the data. So, Bill, you're up next, and we're excited to see what you have for your presentation today.
Great, thanks, Graham, and thanks, Memi and Stefan. It's really been a pleasure working with both of you on the World Economic Forum. Just a quick introduction. So my name is Bill Beither. I am the CEO and co-founder of MachineMetrics. We got our start, I guess it's about 6 years ago now, and really to address the problem that both Memia, or the opportunity that Memia presented, and also the problem that Stefan presented, where very few of these Industry 4.0 or IoT implementations really result in value. And so we've really set out to simplify. And what we see is that there's been a lot of innovations in in robotics and automation, but we still are consumed in manufacturing with these manual processes. And you know, to automate these processes really requires closing the loop with data from the machines that run these processes and make these parts. And that is why we built MachineMetrics, which is manufacturing's industrial data platform for machines. What we've done is simplified capturing and transforming data from this equipment, and then we make that data actionable by increasing visibility, enabling predictive analytics, and also configurable workflows that automates the operation of the machine. We're really on a mission to build the operating system for the autonomous factory. And what we're doing, we really help improve the operation of the machine, but we also connect the what we call the machine data digital thread. And this is really around closing that loop on the entire product lifecycle, from the product design, the production of the part, quality, maintenance, and logistics. Really, this is what we're doing with that machine data, and we're really just getting started. So my presentation today really is less about what we do, and it's more about the data that we found over the years of collecting from so many machines. But before I dive into that, I really wanted to give you a bit of an idea of how we actually capture data from this equipment. The first thing that we've done, really to address the pain of capturing this data, and a reason why so many of these implementations have trouble to get to value, is that we've made that process of capturing and transforming data from machines very simple. So what we've done is we have this edge device that is connected to a machine. We pull data from the machine's PLC if it's available, or from additional sensors or relays. And you can see that green device is our edge device, and we can pull data from sensors. Here's a current sensor. So there's many different ways to access data from the machine, and our customers almost always install themselves without us having to go on site or provide very much assistance. So what that's resulted in is a number of customers. We are focused. I mean, the data set that I'm about to present is focused on North America. We do have customers worldwide, but this is where we've really gotten our start. And you can see kind of where those customers exist. We have hundreds of customers and many thousands of machines that are actively streaming data in real time. And what we've seen is we've captured 1.3 billion minutes of runtime. And this really represents a very strong data set that provides us with a pretty high confidence a measure of North American manufacturing productivity. So what the types of equipment that we connect to really is we're focused on discrete manufacturing. So you can see here kind of some equipment that we connect to. So a lot of CNC machines, metal fabrication machines, welders, even like paint booths, etching machines. Really, we've expanded to encompass any discrete manufacturing equipment, and that is really part of this data set. So, and then diving in a little bit deeper, we've been so I've been posting, if you follow me on LinkedIn, and we have our data science team post on our blog, essentially on every couple of weeks, what our performance index really is, and we really started posting this at the beginnings of the pandemic, and noticed that we did see a significant drop. If you look at this blue line here, we saw right at March. In fact, it was around March 12th that started to dip last year. We saw about a 20% drop in productivity. And again, this data is coming directly from the runtime of the machines that we've connected to. That's the most basic data item that every single machine that we connect to captures. And then we've seen essentially an increase back to where we were before throughout Q3 and Q4. And then the beginning of this year has been pretty standout. Really matches what we hear from the PMI index. We're up. Prior to the beginning of the pandemic, just a year later, we're at an 11% increase over 2020. And then we saw so we maintained this level of utilization performance, which is just around that 30% mark. And again, this really is a 24/7 metric. And then, where we are right now is at a 25% improvement over really the depths of the pandemic last year. And really, we're pretty confident in this data. It's about a margin of error is about 1.8%. And this is based on the sort of AMT data of 3 million active machine tools that are over $50,000 in value. So this is pretty exciting. We can see that there's, certainly we see this as some of this is really catching up from the sort of the supply chain issues and the plant shutdowns from a year ago. But it also demonstrates the strength, in particular in U.S. manufacturing. But we've been seeing this worldwide. Just another look at this data. Here is the just a trend, monthly trend, and you can definitely see our dip down from the under 30% to 22%, which is the low, and our high was just not in April but March. We saw 32%. We saw just a slight decrease in April, and then we also track key hours, which is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. whatever local time that we're connected to, and we've seen that was dropped. Actually, the low point was during the some of the holiday hours in December, but we're up at 45% now. And just to give you just a little deeper look at this data set, we do see a kind of a skewed bell curve here. When you're looking at all time, you see many more manufacturers that are in this 20% to like 30% range, but then sort of a trail off into sort of the 80% of some of the the best performing manufacturers. The distribution for our key hours is a little bit more of a bell curve, right around that 40% mark. Just to give you an idea of what that data set looks like. This is sometimes pretty interesting. We can slice and dice this data in many different ways. We see, you might have guessed the most productive day of the week happens to be Tuesday. We kind of see a drop off when it comes to the weekends. And finally, the area that I think is pretty intriguing is that we also capture annotations from our customers that basically, they tell us why a machine is down. We've captured, we're getting close to 1 million of these annotations in a quarter. So this is based on Q4 last year. And half of these annotations are due to the operator being unavailable, which generally means that there was nobody at that machine when there was an issue, and it really sort of sets the stage for automation. We've seen more of this during the pandemic, and which really I think leads to the fact that there's been fewer people on the factory floor. Which really justifies this push in leveraging data and also really investing in automation. So with that, I'm looking forward to some of the questions that we're getting. But I'd like to hand this off to back to Graham.
Wow,
thank you.
That's fascinating, and I love the analysis of downtime annotations. Just to, if you needed another reason, right? If it was hard enough to hire operators, add, a global pandemic to the mix, making it even harder for people to be on the factory floor. And, the impetus for automation seems, quite evident, right? So thanks for sharing that, Bill. Really interesting. And last but not least, Jerry, excited to see what numbers you put together and from the Plex side of things. So I'll let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Graham. You guys see my screen? Are you seeing the presentation mode or the actual slide?
We're seeing the slide, and it looks pretty good.
All right, good deal, good deal. All right, thanks so much, Graham and MachineMetrics for putting this together, and Memia and Stefan and Bill, thanks for your insight. Great stuff. I'm honored to participate with all of these distinguished panelists. So my name is Jerry Foster. I'm the CTO and one of the co-founders of Plex Systems. I've kind of been at the intersection of technology and manufacturing for my entire career, 30 years here so far. And when we first started Plex, I had these long flowing locks of golden blonde hair. And now when I give a presentation, marketing is like, we can't see you because the lights are reflecting off your head. So I've worked hard to adjust the lighting in the office. Hopefully you can see the outline at least of me. Bill, you could probably identify with some of the same issues. So, all right. So who's Plex? We are the smart manufacturing platform. We provide everything that's necessary for a manufacturer to operate: ERP, MES, IoT, supply chain, quality, et cetera. And we do this by connecting all facets of the manufacturing facility: people and systems and machines and their supply chains. We automate their processes and then bring it all together for visibility and quality and control. We were built from the ground up in the cloud for manufacturers, true multi-tenant SaaS, with industry best uptime and renewal rates. So what do we bring to the table? Well, since we are 100% cloud, we have a unique ability, very much like MachineMetrics, to view aggregated metrics real time for all of our manufacturing customers around the world. And we have a lot of metrics to choose from, but for the course of measuring the effects of the pandemic, we settled on the metric of production. So every time a container or a bin or a pallet fills up with material at a work center, a production record is created in our system. So the actual number of production records created gives us a consistent metric across industries, across time, without having to worry about things like units of measure. So we can slice that data across many categories: region, industry, revenue band, et cetera. But for the sake of this webinar, we're showing North American production across all industries that are served by Plex customers. So when we started 2020, things looked good at the beginning. Production was on an upward trend, and some of that was fueled by new customers, some of that by strong growth in our current customers. And then bam, the pandemic hit. And in the space of only 6 weeks, production dropped a staggering 83%. I've never seen anything like that in all my 30 years in manufacturing. It was just something to behold and to watch in real time. And then we started to claw our way back, right? Some customers were identified as essential industries. Some of our customers converted to producing for the pandemic, like ventilator parts or PPE. And then we saw that recovery at a fairly good clip, but it took us a good 4 months to recover. And it wasn't until the end of August that we had achieved our pre-pandemic levels of production. Then looking at the rest of 2020, we can see that production leveled off a bit, although it still continued to increase slightly over the course of the rest of the year. Now, just as an aside, it might be obvious, but in case it's not, the dips that you see here, those are holidays in our production metrics: July 4th, Labor Day, and Thanksgiving. And obviously those are normal, and we see those every year. But between Labor Day and Thanksgiving, our customers were running production at about 105% of their pre-pandemic levels. And then there was this real interesting jump at the end of the year, after Thanksgiving, to about 111% of where we were back in March. I suspect we are trying to get cover for the upcoming holiday season, knowing that you're already running hot and not wanting to fall even farther behind. It's a situation we found most of our customers found themselves in. Now, one of the questions we asked at the end of the year was, what was the net effect of that huge drop between March and August? In other words, how much of a hit did we take compared to expected production had there been no pandemic? So when we looked at this gap, we measured it against an estimate of what we believe production would have been based on algorithms using previous year's production and normal growth patterns. And we found that the overall hit to the year was about 26%. So despite the recovery that we're experiencing now, 2020 really took it on the chin. I mean, just think about that. A quarter of production and revenue just wiped off the books that you'd expected to make. So it was a tough year all around for sure. Now let's add the first quarter of this year and see where we're at. You can see the big dip, of course, representing the Christmas and New Year break. It's a full week there. Most of our North American customers take that time off. But then for the start of this year in Q1, we were operating very similar to Q3 and most of Q4 last year at about 105% of where we were in March of 2020. Now I do want to point out this real interesting dip right here in the middle of February. Any idea what that is? Oh, I know, it's Valentine's Day. No, romantics, we're not. That was actually the massive ice storm that hit Texas in mid-February. That was the effect on North American production. You might be like, really, a storm? I mean, I know it's Texas. I know they think they're all that in a bag of chips, right? But a storm in one state caused a 23% dip in all North American production. And the answer is yes, it did. There's so many reasons. For instance, the storm shut down a plant that feeds 85% of the resin used in the United States. And those resins are used in bumpers, steering wheels, seat foam. Last I checked, we're still demanding seats and steering wheels in our vehicles. So that had a major effect. So when we talk about supply chain a little bit after the presentations, think about Think about that moment in February in Texas. Now I want to change the graph slightly from showing production as a raw aggregate number, which is what we've been looking at, to showing production as a percent. So basically what that means, each data point on this chart reflects production that on that week as a percentage of production on March 15th of 2021, which was our tipping point for the pandemic. So you can see the form of the chart is basically the same, showing the percentages that we've kind of already talked about. But the reason I did this is because I wanted to compare apples to apples, the production against active and unique users using our system. So when we drop on top of this production graph, the percentage of users using Plex, and that's the percentage of users as a percent, again, of the number that they were at in March 15th of last year, we see some fascinating things. You can see the big dip in users there when in the middle of the trough at the beginning of the pandemic. But then something really interesting happens here in August. You can see that production actually starts to outstrip the returning users. And it continues that way, except for holidays, for the rest of the year and into this year as well. It's quite amazing because you can actually see in Q4 of last year, we were running, or Plex customers were running at about a 13% difference between those two metrics. So think about that. They're doing 5% more output with 8% fewer employees. And then at the end of the year, that really jumped up to a 16% gap, and now it's leveled off to about an 8 or 9% gap between those two metrics. And I think that really speaks to the resiliency and tenacity of manufacturers, the ability of always figuring out how to do more with less, because we found ourselves in a position that we'd never seen ourselves before, and we're still doing the best we can to cover and to get that output to where it should be. And so it's always humbling to talk with our customers and seeing what they do to get it done. So that's my presentation, just an overview of what happened in manufacturing last year across all of our customers in the cloud. Thank you.
Entertaining and fascinating as always, Jerry. I was crossing my fingers that was going to be a Valentine's Day dip, but I guess not.
Exactly.
The data doesn't lie, right? So,
Exactly.
so firstly, like everybody, amazing presentations. Really enjoyed it. I love just firstly kind of starting out with some of the industry trends, and what we're seeing from self-reported data, and then also hearing from providers like MachineMetrics, Plex, what they're actually seeing in the data and how the how their users are experiencing it in real time. Now, as we move into the the next portion of this this webinar, and before we move into this, I want to encourage everybody now, if you have questions, about the specific presentations, if you have questions about industry trends that you believe that you'd like to learn more about, drop those into the Q&A section right now, or throughout the rest of the presentation, and we'd love to get to those. So, but just to get things started, let's just start with you, Bill. What was the top disruption that you saw this past year, and how has data unlocked this advancement?
Well, I think, and actually Jerry pointed that out very well in his data, that during the pandemic you had less people on the factory floor, and as operations resumed, fewer people came back, and it was through social distancing or just some cost reduction efforts. And there's definitely been a big push. I mean, I know that just from MachineMetrics, I know a lot of other companies in the industry, we saw just a huge surge in Q3, Q4 in interest, and using data to drive automation and autonomy on the factory floor. So there's no question that the pandemic really accelerated the digital transformation, and using data to drive automation is on the top of mind for manufacturers. And really, we're seeing it in just more adoption of our products, and again, I really was intrigued in Jerry showing that in his data. But that really, I think, is the biggest. The other really is there's a push to upskill workers, because as we leverage data and really to drive automation, more skills are required. Slightly fewer people. More, let's say, cobots and robotics to replace some of the mundane tasks. So there's really a big push to using, developing this content and training, and really taking the existing team that you have and advancing them to be able to use these new tools more effectively.
Interesting. And in regard to, you're absolutely right that workforce, when created a disruption of its own, right? And now, now we need to see the technology kind of take that on. Does anybody else have like a disruption that really stood out for them this past year, other than obviously the pandemic and all the other things that were innately disruptive?
I would say that.
Go ahead, Memia. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would say echoing Bill and Jerry's data about the fact that COVID-19 has been the top, but I think that lately manufacturers have been challenged with aspects such as increased transportation costs when it comes to sea freight. They've been suffering from shortages of the plastic resin that Jerry outlined earlier, the semiconductor shortage situation as well. And then they've also seen an increase of prices of certain commodities such as copper. And looking a little bit in the future, I think climate imperative is going to be the top disruption to come. And thinking a little bit about the role of data here and analytics, I would say that the first step, if we think towards carbon reduction in manufacturing, is accurately knowing what your emissions are. And when one knows that most of the emissions arise from upstream or downstream the supply chain with the external scope 3 emissions, sharing data with one another is going to be key in getting that full picture and full visibility over the supply chain's emissions. And once we have that picture, then back to Stefan's point, we can really leverage data and analytics to optimize our operations so that they consume less energy, we consume less waste, and get things right first time.
It's really interesting. Jerry.
That's exactly right. And it's interesting when I think of disruptions last year, at least, underlying what everyone has talked about so far, but hasn't been explicitly mentioned, is the cloud. And I know it's kind of old hat when we talk about Industry 4.0 technologies. It's much more sexy to talk about artificial intelligence and 3D printing and those things, but I think it's hard, or it's easy to forget sometimes for our hardcore manufacturing, how many are still haven't yet adopted cloud as a fundamental part of their IT and OT infrastructure. And so for our customers that were in the cloud, and I'm sure the other panelists who have experience with customers who had a cloud foundation for their systems, they were at an extreme advantage when this hit. Our customers were able to send almost everyone home when everything shut down, except the most essential workers, and they were able to run their factories without missing a beat. Everyone was able to do their job, see what was going on, make decisions. And it was really fascinating to watch the difference between our customers who had a cloud infrastructure and some of our cloud customers who have some plans that wasn't implemented yet. And the difference in night and day between those two and being able to manage that through the pandemic was amazing. So I think that was a fundamental disruption, at least that we saw.
Yeah, it's funny how the cloud in reality, right? Maybe not the buzzword of today, but in reality, right? Still not as highly adopted as you would expect from an industry that was it was paramount to be able to work remotely during that time. We hosted a webinar specifically around that, and we found that very few manufacturers were actually able to continue operations remotely, and that was a huge disruption for their operations. Stefan, as you know, supply chain has been under significant stress for some time, right? And COVID and the pandemic was undeniably an accelerant to that stress, maybe even a breaking point. Have we seen some transformations that have been accelerated, and how?
Yeah, I mean, echoing also what Jerry and the mayor said, we have two very interesting trends, right? One is on the challenges that companies are facing. They have grown massively over the last year, right? Manufacturers and supply chain managers are much more aware of the scarcity of certain products, but also the availability of certain assets. And on top, they need to tackle sustainability and climate change. And at the same time, technology becomes much more available. And many COOs now agree that they need a much higher level of transparency in their supply chains. They need early warning systems. This won't happen overnight because many companies are still, having legacy infrastructure. But there's a strong momentum, and I almost feel like the COVID crisis has increased, many organizations' appetite for change, because they saw what is possible now during the crisis, that some organizations can transform to being completely remote, others really collaborating really strongly with their suppliers that they have never imagined before. So overall, I'm pretty positive that there's a strong momentum now. And again, the appetite is huge to embark on those transformations.
Can I jump on that real quick?
Absolutely.
It's right on point, because when we talk to our customers, it's real interesting. Through last year, most of them are in varying stages of their digital transformation, right? And it's hard to introduce all this cool new technology right in the middle of a crisis. So for a lot of them, they've just been getting through by brute force, 3 shifts, 7 days a week. But we're hearing exactly what you said, Stefan. They are now much more open to justifying their research and adoption of these technologies, cobots and digital twins and AI and things that'll help them get, because these kind of things are not going away. These kind of storms and pandemics, and so they want to be prepared. And so we're seeing the same thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I would add to that it seemed like that there was there was this push. What we saw is there was this huge resurgence in Q3, Q4 in the SMB side of the business, where they can make decisions faster. They don't necessarily have to set budgets ahead of time. And then beginning in 2021, we're seeing the larger manufacturers that are really making those investments. So clearly, you have new fiscal years that are starting. Last year was really, set the tone for the budgets to invest in these technologies this year.
Yep.
It's quite
Absolutely.
Oh, Memia, please.
No, I just wanted to echo that. And I think when we also tie that in with the collaboration between different suppliers, we now see manufacturers going sometimes on joint investments with their suppliers when it comes to technology projects. Sometimes it can be a little bit challenging for some of the suppliers to maybe meet the manufacturer's strategy. So there was really close collaboration and support done on that side to do it hand in hand.
It's very interesting. Like the collaborative nature of the Renaissance, I find particularly interesting. Memia, and Stefan, I've been fortunate enough to work with both of you to some extent on, some of these, I call it data democratization initiatives, right? But realistically, how will, essentially a more, how do you say this, community-based, group-focused effort to change lead for a more sustainable industry moving forward?
I think Graham, that's going to be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Stefan.
Do you want to? Okay. I think Memia started, talking about transparency, and with many applications, be it for sustainability, be it for maintenance, right? The first step is always to create levels of transparency, gather all the data before you can leverage advanced analytics to make predictions or even allow autonomous systems. And for sustainability, we're seeing the same. We're seeing many efforts, even by big polluters, if we might want to call them that way. But they want now, a significant level of transparency over their emissions and a strong drive towards improvement. And companies do understand that, some of these challenges they cannot tackle alone. And they're very happy to collaborate. That could be with smaller technology firms, but could also be with partners up and down their value stream to create this common picture of transparency. And the second thing that we have also investigated quite a lot is how you incentivize data sharing and data collaborations. And most of the time it works really well when there's a common purpose. And with sustainability, that is an easy given. Many people can agree that it's worthwhile to invest in sustainability. But this mechanism of how to incentivize different partners along the ecosystem to contribute data, but also to benefit from the insights, is something really interesting. And we need to get this right to also unlock this higher level of collaboration.
Yeah, when you think about collaboration and technology, when I think of a technology like blockchain, when you think of applying blockchain to the supply chain, it forces visibility across that system. And I know players so far have been hesitant to jump in because you have to trust. There's an element of trust involved in doing that. And previously, I think that wasn't there, but now I think they're realizing the advantages of that visibility and trust across the supply chain and being able to see everything and plan. Then apply artificial intelligence to the forecasting and the optimization of freight and routing and vessel usage and all these things. I think we're all much more open to than we were a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Memia.
No, please.
No, I was just saying it's interesting. I, from the software side, right? I know companies like Plex, MachineMetrics, right? In some ways we have to practice that same that same strategy, right? I mean, you don't necessarily want to try to do everything yourself, right? A suboptimal model, right, where companies focus on, or trying to recreate things outside of their expertise, essentially results in waste, right? Wasted time, wasted resources, and at least Stefan, to your stat, that only 16% of companies were able to achieve value. I personally, and I know MachineMetrics, we really believe that is likely because of that, that undifferentiated lifting, right? So a more optimal model is for every company to be able to do what they do and do it well in an ecosystem approach. Nemia, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that was great. Thank you. And I mean, thinking about the data exchange aspect and having worked on that, I think the trust aspect is one of the top barrier to that. And we see that there's different types of solutions to it. It's either by having the right technology that protects you in case of, or it's by, you can alleviate it by the nature of your relationship with the ecosystem partner. So going with strategic partnerships with your ecosystem partner helps. Having the same target picture and purpose that is more for the greater good helps as well. And also ensuring that there's a compensation mechanism and that this brings value in return for both parties very much help build this trust relationship.
It's a great point. It all comes in the end comes down to trust, right, to some extent. And I think for the cloud providers here, for the consultants, for the the World Economic Forum, I think we all recognize that some of the biggest barriers here are just the general fundamentals of capitalist economics, right, and the greater good and the opportunity that exists to do better, right? And in some ways, I think people may look at those two things and see them as combative, but in reality, they actually are not. In fact, they can work very well hand in hand. So I find that very interesting. Well, we're coming down to the end of our time, but I just want to thank everybody really for participating. I truly do believe, it's our obligation when we have information to share this with the general public so we can provide value in times like these. And so I'm grateful for all of you to join. If each, I could give each of you just 1 minute. If you had like a recommendation or even like a suggestion, for moving forward, like how do you see like this industry, the transformation continue to accelerate, continue to facilitate? What is your recommendation, and what do you think every company can do to contribute to that, either for themselves and for the greater industry? And we can start maybe with Stefan, and my clockwise go to Stefan, to Jerry, to Bill, and then Nemia.
For me, it's really this paradigm shift in competitiveness, that it expands beyond efficiency and also includes, how do we include resilience, how do we tackle sustainability, and then look at what is the technological and the organizational foundation that we need for that.
Yeah, and I would add, in addition to the technology and the workforce that we've been talking about, I just read a recent IDC survey that said 60% of businesses were worried about disruption by competitors with superior supply chain capabilities. So you think about that, not new technology, not a new product, but one of the most basic functions of running a business, supply chain management, is going to become a major competitive advantage going forward. So focus on the technology, focus on what you have to do to augment the workforce issue, but don't forget about the supply chain management and making sure you're on top of your suppliers and customers.
Yeah, so I would say my suggestion is use the technology that's out there that's innovating very quickly. Don't try to build it yourself. We've seen so many of our prospects and customers that try to do it themselves, and they get in over their heads very quickly, and just that's where we see a lot of these projects failing. So leverage those startups and companies that really have made those innovations and are making those innovations, because they're always going to be one step ahead. And
heavy lifting. And differentiate heavy lifting makes sense. Memia.
From my side, I'd like to stress the role of manufacturing to be this driver of recovery and growth. I think we've seen that the advanced manufacturing technologies have both helped build resilience, gain this agility in adapting to challenges. So we've seen data analytics, advanced demand sensing, but it also can help trigger or further promote certain operating and new business models. We've seen remote infrastructure management, remote maintenance gaining importance over this last year. We've seen new aspects such as platformatization to rapidly go from design to commercialization. And I think now manufacturers are more and more seeing supply chain as this driver of value rather than the cost center as it used to be before. And I think that is essential to move forward. And there's an opportunity now to work together to share our experience of how we've implemented these technologies, how we've managed to raise some of the concerns related to that to advance this topic. I think collaboration is going to be key along with supply chains.
There's never been a better time than now, and there's never been a better time to work together, right? So thank you all so much for your amazing insights, for your presentations, for your participation in this. It's been an amazing year. I've been grateful to be working with each of you, through that time, individually and as a group, right? To do some of this undifferentiated heavy lifting together. So thank you all again. For those of you who joined us, we really appreciate your time, and you will get a recording of this so you can enjoy it for your own viewing pleasure. And hope everybody has a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.